Welcome back to our next session, Skills and Talents here at Formnext TV at Formnext 2024. Yeah, companies who want to grow their business, they need qualified personnel, and it's not easy to find one. It wasn't easy, and will not be better with demographic change. I think we will face a lack of skilled workforce in future. An overview about the demand, the salaries and motivations of these talents we have on stage right now, and I will give the room to Nick Pierce. Nick Pierce is Managing Director of Alexander Daniels Global, and his presentation will show us detail the additive manufacturing talent market.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, I'm Nick Pierce. I'm the founder and managing director of Alexander Daniels Global. I've been in additive manufacturing now for 11 years. Makes me feel old to say I came to the first Formnext in 2015. So this is my 9th Formnext, would you believe? So yeah, today's presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the additive manufacturing talent landscape, and you lucky people who are here today are going to get the first look at key data and insights from our global additive manufacturing salary survey, which is now in its 9th year. So we'll look at the demand for talent, we'll look at salaries, a little bit about diversity, and what's really motivating candidates who are looking to change jobs. Firstly, just a quick introduction to who Alexander Daniels Global are. We're a recruitment company specializing in digital manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is really the core of our business, and the business was founded on a belief that additive manufacturing will change people's lives. My story, I got into additive manufacturing because I saw the transformative capability of the technology in medical applications, and that inspired me to found this company to basically enable the revolution that I was seeing in additive manufacturing through talent. And so with our business, we work globally with offices in the UK, Germany, and the US, and we help this industry by finding great talent. So let's have a look at the workforce, and let's first start by looking at what's been happening in the landscape for this industry in terms of people changing jobs. So what we can see in the slide here is that, as you might expect, during the COVID years in 2020, we saw very little movement in this industry. Obviously, post-COVID, we had what's known as the Great Resignation, if people are aware of that. And, we can sort of see that, across North America and EMEA, we had really high volumes of people changing jobs. And that continued still into sort of 2022. And we're starting to sort of see that dropping right off then in 2023 as market conditions within the additive manufacturing industry started to affect the demand for talent. And so there were fewer opportunities and fewer people who were then, changing jobs. Now, I think what we see now in this rebound in 2024 is ultimately driven by a little bit of uncertainty. The industry is going through challenging times, and that uncertainty, as well as, well-publicized layoffs, has seen a number of the workforce having to change jobs as a result. What we can also see now in terms of salaries is how the correlation between candidates who are changing jobs impacts then what's going on with salaries in the industry. As you might have expected, in 2020, actually salaries were going down. People were not being paid as much as they were in years which were economically better. But as we saw in the previous graph, those salaries rebounded significantly in 2021 as the demand for talent really accelerated in the post-COVID years, and continued into sort of 2022. I think what's notable here is that in particular the APAC region, which is the grey line on the slide, recovered slower from COVID. So we have a slightly different curvature there, whereas certainly EMEA and the US rebounded very quickly with very, very high demand for talent. What we're starting to see now in terms of the salaries, for example, in the latest data that we've collected for 2024, is what I would call more normalization of salaries. Salary growth that is around or slightly above inflation levels. I think what we're seeing is the economic headwinds in China are really starting to impact salaries in Asia. And later we'll look at more specifically the disciplines and how they're impacted, because in some instances we are still seeing growth in salaries. In other instances, and in particular in APAC, we don't see much growth at all. So what I want to talk about now is the growth of the workforce in additive manufacturing. So, taking this slide in isolation, what we sort of see here is that the overall growth of the workforce for this previous year is around 8%. If I look back to previous years, so, going back to sort of 2022, we were sort of seeing growth rates of around 22%. 2023, we were still seeing growth rates of around 18%. But what we're starting to see now is a general trend that the growth rate of talent entering the additive manufacturing industry is slowing down. Now that creates a challenge for the industry. Okay, admittedly right now the industry isn't growing in the same way as it has been in previous years, but the fact that we're seeing this slowing in growth rates, and we'll look at it a little bit later, we'll start to see where that's going to create some impact in the industry around certain skills and certain roles where actually we do still need growth. We do still need to inspire new people to enter the industry. And I think the challenge that an industry is facing now with slowing of the growth of the workforce is that actually when the industry does pick up, and inevitably it will, because it always does from a cyclical standpoint, we might not have the talent we need to really feel the benefits of what this technology is really capable of. This slide tells us a little bit about the sort of talent demographics. So when I first got into the industry sort of 10, 11 years ago, the real gap in experience that organizations need were that sort of 2 to 5 year engineer that, understood the technology, either from a design standpoint, from a process standpoint, from a manufacturing, engineering standpoint, and that was a huge gap that we sort of saw. Well, now what we can sort of see here is that, those people with, for example, 10 plus years experience in the industry now accounts for, over 28% of the industry in our most recent survey. So we see now what I would call a maturing workforce. So what this means is that actually we have now got people with 2 to 5 years experience, 5 to 10 years experience, and indeed, vastly experienced 10 years plus, who have knowledge around the technology and have that experience built up over years to really now take the technology forward. And I think this is really important in helping the industry to identify new applications and ultimately to grow. Where the problem arises, for me, and what I see in this data in particular is, let's look at those candidates, and this sort of speaks to what Hayden was talking about a minute ago. How do we get those candidates in that have no experience? Because actually that's where we see a lot of demand. In particular, a lot of the clients that we're talking to now who are trying to adopt additive manufacturing technology need entry-level people. They need people to run machines. And actually what this chart shows is that at that level, people with no experience, people even with 0 to 2 years experience, so just basic understanding of either the machine, the process, design, applications, they aren't there. And this is where the gap is really starting to arise in the workforce. And, again, coming back to the previous slide, the slowdown in the growth of the workforce is not happening at the 2 to 5 year, 5 to 10 year, and 10 year plus levels. The slowdown in the growth of the workforce is happening at the very spot where we need it most, which is at this early entry level. And so this is a major challenge that I think the industry is going to face in the coming years, where we actually have machines in organizations that are not being used. And they're not being used because they don't have the people to run them, to use them. And so here we have an untapped resource that could really help this industry to grow and accelerate. And the barrier to that is this entry level. And in fact, I saw, I think last week, as a precursor to Formnext, an investment strategies talk that was sort of hosted by AM Strategies. And Brigitte, who's the CEO of Materialize, said that when she talks to customers, there's three main challenges that her customers face in leveraging this technology, and one of those was talent. And still, this remains an issue. Now, I gave a presentation, not on this stage, but at Formnext back in 2016, where I was talking about the fact that we've got this 30, 35%, 40% CAGR for additive manufacturing, and talent was going to be an issue. And I'm now stood on the stage in front of people again, some, sort of 9 years on, and we're still facing the same problem. So the question that I pose to the industry, to educators, is what are we doing about it? What are we going to do about it? Because ultimately we're 9 years on and we haven't moved far enough to really, really leverage the fantastic opportunity that additive manufacturing presents for industry. So I'm going to get into the detail now and talk a little bit about, okay, where is the demand for talent? So the area that is most in demand, according to our survey, is R&D. So again, this points to the fact that adoption of this technology is there, but those companies, 50% of the companies that responded to our survey said that they will be hiring in R&D in the next 12 months, followed surprisingly by sales, but we'll drill into that and sort of see, okay, exactly what roles we're looking for. I love this. This chart. I think it's probably visually very stunning. Maybe difficult to kind of read and sort of see, well, what is it actually telling us? But what this does is it breaks down within each discipline what the most in-demand roles are across the different sectors. So, of that sort of 50% of companies that are hiring in R&D, what I can tell you is that the two most in-demand roles there are process engineers and additive manufacturing engineers. So what they're telling us is they need people who understand the manufacturing process, can optimize the process for production, and they need people who understand demand, who can help them develop products that can leverage this amazing technology. We saw in the previous graph, sales, is relatively high, but the type of sales profile that people are looking for has changed. So we're not looking for the 5 to 10 year plus experienced sales guy. In this market, which is challenging, what are being hired entry-level salespeople, business development reps, inside salespeople, cold callers. We've got to grow this industry. We've got to present this technology to new organizations. And so that's where the growth is from a sort of sales perspective. I think this is, say a picture paints 1,000 words. What this is telling us is a little bit about what's happening in the market at the moment. And I know I've been sort of saying there's not enough talent. You might look at this and say, well, 120 candidates for every job. There's plenty of talent there. Really, what this shows is actually, yes, the AM jobs market by a factor of 6 in the last year has gone down. So there are 6 times fewer jobs this year than there were last year. And that's why this is quite a sort of stark statistic to look at. But as I sort of highlighted, there are gaps that aren't being met. So while there are 120 people for every job, they're not at the levels or with the experience that is required by companies that are hiring. So that's why I think this is a little bit misleading. So let's have a look at what this means for salaries. Actually, for the first time, we've seen relatively low growth in salaries. The part of the market, and this is a consolidated view, and we'll look a little bit what's happening in the US, in EMEA, and in APAC individually in a second. But what this is telling us is what's going on globally. Applications and consulting has seen the biggest growth in salary overall, of over 8%, and R&D and engineering 6%. So thinking back to where the demand is, salaries are still growing where the demand is. In areas like service, software, sales, we don't see salaries increasing at the levels that they have been in previous years. Looking at in isolation, North America and Canada, we can see evidently that R&D and engineering is a really, really high demand. I mean, Trump's appointment, made in America, this is good for the industry. We are going to see huge demand in this area next year for R&D and engineering talent, along the lines of what I explained: process engineers, additive manufacturing engineers. In EMEA, applications and consulting. So again, those people who understand how to leverage this technology, how to maximize the value of additive manufacturing inside organizations. In APAC, interestingly, we've seen declines across almost every salary area, every discipline, with only applications and consulting holding growth rates in 2024. A big topic for the industry has always been diversity. One of the things that when I first entered the industry that I spoke about a lot with companies was the fact that the male-female split was really, really imbalanced. We've collected data for 9 years. When I first started, this ratio was around 10%. So actually, I think it's quite a positive sentiment now that we see a better balance of gender diversity in the industry. And this data is taken both from our salary survey and LinkedIn Talent Insights, which is a tool that we also have access to. And I think the fact that we're getting close now to sort of 24-25% in terms of the gender diversity speaks volumes for some of the programs that companies like EOS, HP have really focused on to drive diversity in the workforce. So when we do the survey every year, we ask candidates, how likely are they to change jobs next year? One of the things that's really striking about this year is that the uncertainty that exists within the industry has seen a shift towards a greater proportion of people saying they are extremely unlikely to change jobs. So I think it's a 30+% increase in the people who are saying now that they're extremely unlikely to change jobs within the next 12 months. I'm trying to whistle through this so that you get all the content, so I'm going as quick as I can because my time is going down rapidly in front of me. Motivations to change jobs. When you ask someone face to face what motivates you, career progression, yeah. Great culture, yeah, always comes up. When we survey people, and it's anonymous, salary. It's the unspoken thing, but actually it is still the number one motivator for why somebody will change jobs. Second then is career progression. Interestingly, what we see in the report this year is that actually people, we would estimate, are a little bit demotivated, and actually the only two areas that have increased are work-life balance and company culture. Those two things as motivators have increased in 2024 versus where they were in 2023. I think I'm going to get there just about on time because this is my last slide. So what does the future look like? I've talked about those areas of demand around operators and technicians. This is going to be the key to the growth of the industry. We need more entry-level talent. I think we're going to see some what I would call brain drain. as the industry is facing challenging conditions, I think some of those 10-year plus people or 5 to 10-year plus people with experience, where there are fewer opportunities for their growth in this industry, we might lose them. We're starting to see already normalization of salaries and demand for talent. 2 or 3 years ago, the proliferation of salaries was unsustainable, and I think that those times are over. And then finally, I think what we will see is a more flexible workforce. I think the rise of contract and on-demand hiring or staffing, as the industry grows, a more flexible workforce will help it overcome the sort of peaks and troughs that we might see in this industry. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Again, as Hayden said, marketing will kill me if I don't say this, but you can download a copy of the 2025 salary survey from our website from Monday. So, and then I'll be available for any questions. 10 seconds to go. How's that for timing?
That's a very good timing. A round of applause for Nick. But the good news is we have a little bit time left for one question. I just checked the LinkedIn stream, the live stream. There was no question there. I highlighted your presentation because, as you said, everybody's interested in salaries. That's always the same. But I would be interested in the slide you mentioned, the 120 open searching talents and one open job description. I did not really understand it. Do these 120 people are not really, fit? Are they not fit enough, or is the demand too high from the companies? What is the problem here?
So what this slide shows is it doesn't sort of take into consideration a specific job profile. So that could include sales, service, marketing, R&D. And basically, it just shows the total number of jobs being advertised in additive manufacturing compared against the total number of candidates looking for jobs. It takes no consideration into where those jobs are based or what those jobs are.
Do you have a personal feeling because you're talking to a lot of guys?
Yes. I mean, yeah, there are certainly levels within this industry where, if, for example, you posted I don't know, say like a sales director or something like that, you will get 120 applications for that role, and the relevance of those applications will be probably not that high. If you were posting for, say, a process engineer with specific experience of laser powder bed fusion, you'd probably get not as many responses and even fewer that were relevant.
Okay, I see. But that could be a learning from here, from that the companies should invest more in education for so they can get in some lower qualified personnel and start. You watched the presentation of Hayden?
Yeah.
Just the previous one, and that was a learning there as well, that you should invest as a company, because they don't want to send the people for 1 week to the trainings.
Yeah.
So the message should be they should build up their own training for their own personnel.
Yeah, I'm conscious we're short of time, obviously, but to answer that, my personal belief is that there's a lot of theoretical training in this industry, online courses. This is not a theoretical industry, it's a practical industry. We have machines, we have materials. And so I think the gap that isn't being bridged by the educators fully yet, it's starting to at a university level, but not by the training providers, is practical, hands-on learning. You've got to work with machines, and that's not being addressed, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. An applause for him.
Thank you.
I wish you great success, and stay around here for making contact with one or the other who want to have it. Yeah, after a short highlight break, we will be back in a second. Sven will be moderating our next panel session topic, again, skills and talents. See you then.